How you doing? All right, great. Well, anyways, we're gonna be doing a little walk today. Gonna be doing a little tour. Look at this beautiful East River behind me, huh? Pretty nice. We're gonna be doing a little tour today of Vinegar Hill, guys. This little neighborhood tucked in between the Brooklyn Navy Yard and Dumbo. As you can see, the Manhattan Bridge is behind me. Pretty cool. East River, glorious, huh? Just waiting for a dead body to lap up here. Before we start, guys, Cameron, how the hell are you?
Muy bueno.
What'd you say? Muy bueno? Okay, nice. I believe it's pronounced muy bueno. No big deal, pretty sick accent. All right, anyways, we're gonna start this. Before we start, guys, check out the Patreon, huh? I know if you've watched one of these, you're in for a little treat, you know it too, so check out the Patreon. That's how I support these things, that's how I fund these things, all that crud. And, like and subscribe too. Might as well do it now, so you can just relax and watch the show. All right, well, anyways, let's stop rambling. Cam, you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's frickin' do it. Great. Oh. So starting at the beginning, this area was actually part of the land of the Canarsie Indians, who were I guess, a tribe under the Lenape tribe who was here before, all under the kind of Algonquin nation, but it was known as Renegioconk. I apologize for that pronunciation, please don't cancel me. But it was bought from them by this man named Joris Janssen Rapelje in the 1600s for pretty much nothing, and he held on to it, and his family and descendants held on to it until after the Revolutionary War. Big boo-boo, I don't know if you guys knew this, but there was this little war called the War of Independence that the United States won. Yeah, sick. And when it was over, they took the land from the people who were on the side of the British, and this was some of it. So old Joris and his family loses the land. How sad, because during the War of Independence, he sided with the British. Oh no, loser, whatever, huh? You guys remember that? Okay, anyways, the city took it from him because he was loyal to the British. Big boo-boo there, buddy. So the city takes it and eventually gives it to two developers. John Jackson is one, and Comfort and Joshua Sands are the other. And they're the guys who basically are credited with starting Dumbo and Vinegar Hill. It's actually John Jackson who gives Vinegar Hill its name, Vinegar Hill, because of the Battle of Vinegar Hill, which is part of the Irish independence movement. Spoiler alert, Ireland was a British colony for a very long time. They didn't get their independence until the 1900s, which is wild. We'll talk about that a little later. And the Sands brothers held on to their land until like the 1820s, 1830s when they started to develop it. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, so like Boeing and updating its technology to be safe and reliable, I'll get to that later. Topical, huh? All right, but that's the beginnings of Vinegar Hill. Let's get into its kind of development, huh? It was wilderness, it was this bay. Let's keep it moving. All right, so the first real big development in this area that came along was in the early 1800s, and that was the Brooklyn Navy Yard, right here in Wallabout Bay. Pretty cool. Now this isn't, well, it's kind of on the border of Vinegar Hill. It's more Navy Yard. We'll talk about that in another video, relax. But I wanted to show you here what is kind of straddling the two neighborhoods is the Commandant's house. So the Brooklyn Navy Yard was acquired, this area, Wallabout Bay was acquired, 40 acres, was acquired by the city to create a Navy Yard in the early 1800s, like 1801. And then this house was built in 1805 to house the Commandant of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Pretty cool, nice technical jargon there. In fact, one of the famous admirals of the Navy, eventual admirals, Matthew C. Perry, lived here. That's right. He was, famous for making the relations with the Japanese healthy and the trade. Very cool. That's right. Matthew Perry did that. Could the U.S. trade be any more dominant at the time? Huh? Did you get that reference, Cam? Friends reference. Okay, anyways, this whole area, Brooklyn Navy Yard, was one of the things that helped Vinegar Hill kind of expand and more people kind of came to the area. It also became more settled. I'll talk about that at our next stop and how different developments for people residentially were built here, etc. Now, they don't know who actually designed this. By the way, this is a private residence now. So it's, some one person lives there. It must be someone famous and really, really important. I don't know. like Mario Lopez or something. But the person who they say designed it, they're not exactly sure. They think it was designed by Charles Bulfinch, who was one of the first architects in American history. Remember, the United States didn't come around until the 1780s, so they say he was one of the first, and also John McComb Jr. And yes, Cameron, I see you getting excited. That is John McComb Jr. who designed City Hall and the first St. Patrick's Cathedral. Look at you, you're all excited. You just wet yourself a little bit, I can see that. So they say he did, and it's this federal style house right in the middle of this neighborhood, this mansion. Pretty cool, right here on the water. Which means that, you know, if it's waterfront property here next to Dumbo, this house is estimated to be worth $78 trillion. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here too was that Wallabout Bay right here was actually used during the Revolutionary War as a center for prison ships. Prison ships, man. This is where they kept a bunch of ships and all the different POWs and traders and people who were loyal to the Continental Army. When the British took over New York as its headquarters for the Revolutionary War, they used this area to just stash all the prisoners. They estimate almost 12,000 people, like 11.5 thousand prisoners were killed here. Anyway, and also there's now a prison ship martyrs monument in Fort Greene, which I covered in my video. You can check that out. But the initial monument was located here on Hudson for a while until they moved it to Fort Greene Park. It was located here in this little gated area. They were going to build a monument, and go figure. Guess who got in the way? Good old William Boss Tweed. He got in the way, didn't let it get finished, and they just had like this little gated area. So, shock. The corruption of Boss Tweed, which I've talked about in other videos. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, the Brooklyn Navy Yard was really the first huge development right here in the Vinegar Hill area that kind of get this growing. It's going to start to rain here. We got to keep it moving. Cam, are you scared? I know. Let's keep it moving. All right, so after the land was bought up and things like the Navy Yard opened in the early 1800s, this area started to get developed in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, right? I'm actually here in front of 237 to 249, Front Street, which is one of the little historic areas of this neighborhood. This is one of the smallest historic districts in the city, the Vinegar Hill Historic District, but they're beautiful little buildings, some of them in Greek Revival architecture style, very pretty, which was very popular around that time period. A hearkening back to the Athenian democracy and those ideals, right? We're talking about Greek Revival, the architecture style, not, Mamma Mia reboots. We're talking about, beautiful architecture. Anyways, it was this time that people started to move here, to work here, to live here, etc. Now, there was a little lull in construction around the 1860s, 1870s, but then in the 1880s, it took off again. The Irish were fighting the British at the time for their independence. In 1798 was the Battle of Vinegar Hill. That was one of the big battles in this kind of movement for freedom and independence, and that's what they named this neighborhood. Kind of on the nose, I guess, but not as on the nose as the eventual nickname it got in the 1880s, which is Irish Town. Now, by the way, keep in mind the Irish didn't get their independence from the Brits until like in the 1920s, which is really late. And their battling with the Brits was kind of a big part of Ireland's history. In fact, did you know this, Cameron? The Lucky Charms guy is actually based on an 18th century freedom fighter named Owen McGillicuddy. Did you know that?
That's an actual fun fact.
That's not true, though. I just made that up. It's just some cartoon. But that'd be kind of crazy if it was a freedom fighter on the Lucky Charms box. Anyways, it was called Irish Town because Irish started moving here. Keep in mind, I talked about this in my Irish New York video. You can watch that. But the potato famine and the results of it, which were exacerbated a lot by the British, was one of the reasons that so many Irish came here in the mid-1800s, and as they graduated to other parts of the city from the 5 Points in Lower Manhattan, they moved to places like this. You also have other little buildings in this area, like 227 Front Street, which was a former firehouse. Very pretty little building, still kind of located in this area. You also have a lot of the Belgian blocks, which are the stones in the street. There's a difference between Belgian blocks and cobblestones. The Belgian blocks tend to be more, I guess, symmetrical blocks, whereas cobblestones are just kind of stones thrown in there. This is a little fact you can point out when you're on one of your dates. Walk around with your date and when they say cobblestones, point out the fact that it's actually a Belgian block. And watch how fast that date gets canceled, baby. No one likes to be corrected. Learn that one the hard way. And as the Industrial Revolution took off in the late 1800s and early 1900s, then you start to get more industry coming in this neighborhood, and we'll talk about that at our next stop, huh? But this is some of the little, I guess, the remnants of, Irish Town. Sounds like the name that someone who hates Irish people would give it, but that's what it was called. Pretty crazy. Let's go. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, this area, like Dumbo, which I talked about in that video, okay, turned more industrial. You're right next to the water. You got all different kind of stuff going up. I'm actually in front of the Con Edison plant. Any of you guys who've had to overpay for your energy bill have heard that name before. But there actually used to be 4 smokestacks here. There's actually opened in the 1920s. They actually have one smokestack left, but they actually reserve the right to pretty much all the waterfront in Vinegar Hill. As if them sending you your bill every month wasn't bad enough, they took all the waterfront here as well. But this kind of shows the kind of turn towards the industrial in the area. In fact, at 231 Front Street, near where we were earlier, you would have a building that was back in the 1800s, late 1800s, the Benjamin Moore plant. The name you might recognize. Any of you guys who've ever, Googled for one day how to paint your own apartment before paying someone else to do it, you'd know that they're the paint company. So they had their factory there, their plant. There was also Damascus Bakeries opened here in the 1930s. They have a little plant here as well. They're famous for their pita. Huh? You like pita, Cameron?
Love it.
Pita might be the best kind of bread. That and Wonder Bread. I'm kidding. Wonder Bread should be used as packing peanuts. There are also, all kinds of different little shops and little retail and things like that were in the area as well. So this plant, actually, interestingly enough, was actually sued, and they had to pay over $600,000 in damages for dumping 30,000 gallons of transformer oil into the East River, which 30,000 gallons is like a drop, almost literally a drop in the ocean when it comes to pollution in the East River back in the day. But that happened in, I think it was like 2017 or 2016. Also, they actually just recently, this is like last year, they announced a green energy hub that they're going to build here. 800 million green energy hub, which is pretty nice, which means it's going to be where a lot of different green energy comes and kind of combines and is sent out. I don't know the technicalities of it. All I know is that they better finish it soon before I'm doing these tours in a scuba suit and we're underwater. And part of the reason the industry set up here is because you had consolidation of all the boroughs in 1898. You had the building of the Manhattan Bridge in 1909. These things brought more people here, made it more, I guess, connected to Manhattan. So that was a really big deal. You also had different warehouses and spaces that were opened throughout the early 1900s as well. Now this would all shift after World War II as industry would leave the cities, which tended to happen here in New York, and brought lots of neighborhoods down, which we'll talk about at our next stop. All right, so in the mid-1900s, after World War II, this neighborhood kind of falls into disrepair as industry leaves. Eventually you had the Navy Yard also decommissioned in the 1960s. So the neighborhood kind of goes to, it becomes a little decayed and depressed. I'm actually standing in front of the Admiral Faragate houses, which was a housing project built here in 1952. So this is actually named after Admiral David Faragate, who fought during the Civil War. He's credited with saying the famous line of, damn the torpedoes, or something like that, where he's just basically like, screw it, we're just keep going forward, man. He's kind of a wild guy. In fact, he first became a soldier under his father's command at the age of 11 during the War of 1812. That's crazy. It beats the hell out of going with your dad to Chuck E. Cheese. I'll tell you that. Instead of going to Chuck E. Cheese, you could go kill some British, huh? So in 1952, to create this housing project, for example, they used urban renewal, which means demolishing a lot of what was here. They demolished a lot of the townhouses and things. In fact, compared to the 1885 plan of this neighborhood, only 12 of the 43 original streets and layout actually still remain, which is kind of wild. It's a very small percentage. Now, an interesting point is this actual project is an example of how they didn't really think it through, because it's actually kind of isolated. So to the right it has, to the east it has Navy Yard, to the west it has Dumbo, very fancy neighborhood, to the north it has more expensive townhouses, and to the south it has the BQE. So there's not a lot of affordable, shopping and different resources for it, which is one of the, I guess, complaints. And it also, it adheres to a design of a lot of the housing projects of the mid-1900s that has since been disproven as being effective, because it isolates the tenants. It has like the garden city, like everyone kind of supposed to hang out in their own little park area in the middle of the project, but in the process it isolates it from the neighborhood around it and creates it almost like a segregation in a way. But you can see this kind of design in the urban renewal projects of the mid-1900s. So there you go. But in the mid-1900s, this neighborhood kind of fell into disrepair. And in the 1970s, people started to move into these townhouses and build them up, what we would call brownstone here in Brooklyn, and beginning the process that we all know and not love so much of gentrification, which we'll talk about briefly. But yeah, this in the mid-1900s was kind of falling into disrepair. We'll talk about how the neighborhood continued to change at the next stop. Covered a lot of stuff there. But yeah, people got kind of mad about how they, you got isolated and there wasn't many resources for them and stuff like that. So go figure. More like salt in Vinegar Hill, huh? So because the neighborhood kind of fell into depression, I guess, and low prices were lower, people moved here. They took advantage of its location, etc. Behind me is the Dorje Lin, a Buddhist center, which moved here in 1991. You had other people start to slowly move in and live here, and you also had, developers take an interest. So for example, the St. Anne's Church, which was built in 1860 to cater to, it was a Catholic church, to cater to the Irish Catholics, huh? They have Catholics in Ireland. I don't know if you knew that. It was actually demolished in the 1990s as well. People were pretty pissed about it because it was a beautiful church and it was demolished by a developer. Sat as a parking lot for a long time, actually. St. Anne's was actually designed by an Irish architect, Patrick Keeley. Now keep in mind the Irish were coming in the mid-1800s along with the Germans. Then in the late 1800s you had Italians kind of coming into this neighborhood as well as Jews who were coming over to Brooklyn from the newly finished Brooklyn Bridge and then from the Manhattan Bridge as well when it was finished in the early 1900s. Another way to remember it is Irish and Germans, mid-1800s, Jews and Italians, late 1800s. Look at that. Huh? You can remember that with the what's it, acronym? Irish, Germans, I gamble in June, Italians, Jews. I gamble in June. There you go. You memorize that for your history test. But these kind of things were slowly starting to happen in the 90s and 2000s. And it's continuing to happen today. You'll see a lot of these big high-rises going up in this area as DUMBO has gotten more expensive and as the Navy Yard has picked up as well. You also have a Wegmans that just opened here. Yeah, the Wegmans. Good luck opening a mom and pop shop today. But, it is at least affordable groceries and things for people who live in, let's say, for the Faragate houses, etc. But not a whole lot of room for any kind of competition, really. I don't want to harp too much on Wegmans. I don't want to upset all the Wegmaniacs. That's actually a thing. People call themselves the Wegmaniacs, people who love Wegmans. I guess, I guess it's better than being a, I don't know, Best Buy sexual. The neighborhood's changed. A lot of things have kind of, been developed, and you can see all the high-rise and things going up here. Not the high-rise, but like the more luxury apartments and whatnot. Because of its location, it is kind of tucked away here. The BQE kind of shields it from the rest of Brooklyn. It's next to DUMBO, but it is on the water, even though the waterfront isn't exposed, which is one of the reasons why it also hasn't been developed. You have Con Ed kind of blocking the view. That would make it that much more expensive. But things are still going up, and the neighborhood's getting more expensive, as a lot of neighborhoods here in New York. All right, and that's it. That's the present tense of Vinegar Hill, this tiny little enclave here. Let's wrap this thing up. What do you think? I feel like I'm gonna get run over here, so let's get the hell out of here. Yeah, what of you, huh? Look at that power plant. Anyways, we made it to the end, baby. Wow, what a trip. What a journey we took. We learned all about Vinegar Hill. What a story, huh? This was all just, wilderness up until after the Revolutionary War. We talked about the Irish, we talked about the industry, we talked about, the fallout after World War II and the build up today. Wow, what a story, huh? What a roller coaster, if you will. Anywho, Cam, did you learn something? Yeah, I could see that on your face. You look very stressed by the information you received. I don't blame you. But guys, if you enjoyed it, check out the Patreon, man. That's a big part of this all, how I fund these things, how it's gonna grow, more importantly, how we're gonna just expand, do more with this, and also just like and subscribe, pay homage to the worship at the altar of the algorithm. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I'm gonna go have a coffee, another one. Ugh. All right, gotta go. See y'all later. Sick. Yeah.